Welcome to Bear Insight, everyone. I am your host, Cole Young. If you like what you see today, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Today, we got ourselves a pretty cool guest, I would say. We got Sacramento State. He has done a lot. He has back-to-back first team All Big Sky. He is also a All-American as well, third team as well as fourth team in 2023 and 2022. He is also this year's first team Big Sky, as what I've said. Let's give it up for offensive lineman himself, Jackson Slater.
How's it going?
Good. How you doing? How you doing?
Pretty good. Just had a little break from football after school and all that, so went home for a little bit. My girlfriend came down to visit, so that was fun. And we're starting up summer workouts tomorrow, so should be a good deal.
That's good. Yeah. It's always good just to go back home and kind of reboot for sure. So
Yeah.
yeah, let's talk about your story and how did you get to Sacramento State? I mean, I think it's just interesting.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely I think my recruiting journey was definitely um different than most for sure. I came from Newport High School in Bellevue, which was not a very successful football school, uh, at least recently, as you probably know.
Hmm.
Um, so, didn't win a lot of games, wasn't, not a lot of coaches rolling through there for the most part. Um, but, I trained at FSP towards the end of high school, and I think that played a role in kind of just me becoming a better ball player for sure. Um, and then, COVID, I think kind of impacted, not being able to go to camps and then not really having a real senior season kind of probably hurt my recruiting a little bit, along with being from a not great football school. Um, but I had some offers, I had some Ivy Leagues, I had some in the Pioneer League. I had a couple PWOs, but I mean, all those are non-scholarship, and then the only scholarship offers I had were Eastern Washington, and which was a partial, and then Sacramento State was my only full ride. So, I kind of waited. I mean, I had a PWO to UW that I guess I was kind of thinking about, but I think at the end of the day, you should go where you're wanted most, probably, and Sac State was willing to, give me a full ride. So I think they for sure wanted me the most out of all those. So kind of went with them, and I think it's been a good decision for me.
It's good. Yeah. I mean, you talk about FSP and Ford Sports. Who have been some key mentor or like big figures for you as you've gone throughout this process so far?
Yeah, I mean, my parents for sure, just always, supporting me and, paying for training or whatever has always been super helpful. And I'm very thankful for them for that. And then I'd say Marcus Abbott, who was kind of the O-line guy at FSP when I was going there. Um,
Mm.
I'd say for sure he was probably the main person that kind of turned me into like from a good high school football player to like a guy that could go play in college, and just learning technique stuff, getting me in the weight room, helped me gain weight, like all the above. He was definitely a huge help. And he ended up moving out of Washington. He's in California now. And he's doing good, but for sure I'm really thankful he was, in Washington when I was, kind of going through high school and figuring it out.
Mhm. So now with you being in the Big Sky, which is one of the top perennial FCS conferences, what do you think makes the Big Sky special per se? Because it's up there as like one of the top three best collegiate conferences in the FCS.
Yeah, it's a really good conference for sure. Um, and I think it's, you know, it's a lot of schools that are kind of West Coast-ish, close together, and I think they kind of just tend to get the kids that are maybe under recruited or, kind of have a chip on their shoulder, hard workers. I feel like that's kind of the type of player that ends up falling in the Big Sky. Which, obviously leads to competitive ball and, a lot of, great players, there's usually a guy drafted out of the Big Sky every year. Lots of mini camps, stuff like that. So it's like there's players in the Big Sky for sure. But I think it's just kind of the type of player that ends up falling in the Big Sky for whatever reason is um just, hard workers and people that I guess like playing ball, you know.
Mhm. Besides the Big Sky, who do you also think is a big perennial conference in FCS? I mean, this without any order.
Yeah, I mean, Missouri Valley, no doubt. All those kind of southern Midwest teams are always really competitive. And, I've played a few over my years here and they're always a test. I think the CAA is usually pretty good. I mean, those are the main two that come to mind for me, I think. But there's teams sprinkled all throughout the FCS that are, ranked usually playoffs, all that. So
Yeah, and on a little bit of a different note, I know Sacramento State went to the playoffs and you guys did. How was that experience overall going to the playoffs?
yeah, I mean, we've been a playoff team the last 3 years. So I mean, every year I've played, we've made the playoffs, which has been awesome. It's definitely different than just regular in-season stuff, I would say. Because unless you're a high seed, you're going to some other part of the country you never been, playing different defenses, different kinds of players than you've been playing all season. So it's definitely like something you would like to have experience for before kind of going into it. Um, and you know, I think that's just how it kind of goes. I mean, I feel like that's college football in general is like kind of getting used to the idea of you're not going to play the same kind of team or same kind of player every week. Um, so I think understanding that and kind of being through it a few years, I've kind of gotten used to the whole playoff structure. But it's a really cool deal. It's really, I mean, it's awesome if we have a good enough season to, make the playoffs and do all that. Um, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and so kind of talking about kind of memories, what have been some of your most memorable um times that you've been in Sacramento State?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we won the Big Sky my first 2 years, so kind of that UC Davis game at the end of the season was always awesome. Because like both years it was like, okay, if we win this, then we win the Big Sky. So being a part of that, being a part of those games and the celebration after was always really fun. Um, definitely my first start my freshman year um, was definitely a big moment. Like kind of surprising to me when it happened. Just because I didn't really expect them to kind of throw me in there, but they did, and I think I had an all right game, so that was a big moment for sure. Um, and then I mean, for the most part, I feel like it all kind of blends together. I mean, I think you take it for granted for sure, like, just hanging out with the guys or being in the locker room or, you know. So, I think once I'm done here, I'll definitely be like, man, I wish I appreciated that a little more. But I mean, all that stuff is, you know, college football and, it's what makes it fun for sure. So,
Okay. Yeah, no, it makes sense. And speaking of the guys, your brother actually is coming to Sacramento State, which I
yeah.
think is really cool. I mean, when I was at Oregon, we had two teammates and they were brothers, and that's always cool to have that. But how are you feeling about this year's online, especially now with your brother going to Sac State?
Yeah, I think it should be really fun having Luke up here. I played with him my senior year in high school as well. So
Mhm.
um being able to do that one last time is I think super awesome. And I think he's definitely the kind of guy that fits in this program, kind of like a little undersized, but hard work. He'll put his head down and and get to work, and he takes his job seriously, and I think that's the kind of player that usually succeeds here. Um, but overall, I think the O line is looking good. I mean, I feel like I've been pretty lucky to be with a group of guys that are pretty locked in and kind of know what they're doing every year. Um, so I mean, I'd say we're pretty experienced up front. Our centers, 20 plus game starter, right tackles, started double digit games. We got a freshman left or right guard who's probably gonna be a starter this year. Who, I mean, I really like. I think he plays, really aggressively, and I think he's got a bright future. And then our left tackle spot, it might be a transfer, but it also, there's also a couple guys that have kind of been in the program for a while that kind of know how things are done, who could also play there too. So, I mean, I feel like up front, our O-line coach does a really good job. So usually I feel like we're pretty solid up front, and I think we can kind of hang our hat on that for sure.
Okay, yeah. And speaking of as a unit, how do you guys prepare for those game weeks? Like, say, when you're playing against a Montana State or a Montana per se.
Yeah, I mean, those are definitely the tougher defenses we go against. But Coach Richardson, our O-line coach, usually doesn't, try and blow our minds with stuff.
Mhm.
Um, he's like, okay, this is what they're gonna do, this is what we're gonna do. We rep it all week. And it usually works out for us. I think we're pretty good at kind of just like adapting to the different defenses we see. Cause I think that's one thing about the Big Sky is, there's not really any true defense you're gonna see every week. I think each team does stuff differently that you kind of have to figure out and kind of know what's coming for sure. Um, so just understanding the personnel, who you're going against, maybe how they play, definitely helps. Um, but I mean, I feel like for me, it's like nothing crazy. It's just listen to what our coach has to say, do what he says, and it usually works out. So.
What is the toughest defense that you've played against per se? I know you talked about Montana State, but like on a side note.
Yeah, I mean, schematically, probably Montana. They do a lot of kind of funky stuff, um, that can be kind of hard to pick up sometimes.
Mm.
Um, but I'd say my freshman year we played South Dakota State in the playoffs, and I think that was the toughest time I've had it against a defensive line for sure.
Mm.
Uh, but I mean, I was a young guy, so I think they kind of took advantage of that a little bit, I think. But it happens to everyone. Everyone gets got here and there, so it's good to
Yeah.
learn from them.
Yep. And speaking like when you talk about like funky stuff is just like where they bring different variations of blitz, like say they bring a cat blitz, but they also bring something else with it with their own little unique flair.
Yeah, I mean, I think, they bring a lot of stuff. They run a lot of games. Different fronts they'll run. They'll be in a 3 down, they'll be in a 4 down. They'll walk up the mics. They just do a lot of different stuff that you kind of just have to prepare for, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but playing against them every year so far, it's you kind of figure it out and kind of know what to expect. But it's still a challenge every year for sure.
Okay. Yeah, no. And so as we talk about this stuff, what's your methodology when it comes to watching game film for the week?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something I'm still working on, kind of getting in a good routine with it for sure. But I definitely like to check out the next week's team um after the game, Saturday or Sunday. I'll usually watch a little bit and kind of just get a little overview of what we might see. And then Monday's usually our day off, so that's when I'll usually, you know, go through it again, kind of go through personnel, um, see who I'm gonna kind of be going against most of the game. Um, and then throughout the week is kind of just, okay, on Tuesdays or, kind of our big install day. Here's what we're gonna run against these guys. Here's what they're gonna bring. Here's their fronts. Um, so, and then taking all that and kind of going back through and um, you know, just making sure I am ready for anything, I guess. But you know, I think I think it kind of varies for sure, just depending on, the team or how complicated the stuff they might bring. Because if they're in like a static three down the whole game, it's like, well, they're not going to do anything that crazy, but definitely depends. But you know,
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. And so I know you've played against FBS teams within itself, and talking about FCS versus FBS, what do you
sure.
think is the difference between those two types of football?
Yeah, I think it's you know, I mean, personally, I don't think it's like a crazy difference. I'd say the starters in the FCS are probably pretty comparable to most starters in the FBS for sure. Um, but I think the kind of difference comes in is maybe like the depth piece. Because I feel like FBS schools probably have a starting five, and then they got maybe a group or two that could also that are also capable of starting. Where I feel like most FCS schools, you got your starting five, and then it might start to trickle down a little bit, and you might not have as many capable guys as a FBS school would. Um, but I think it varies by team for sure. Um, but just playing, played Stanford, played Colorado State. And I mean, I didn't really see a whole crazy difference between, those schools and what we play in the Big Sky. So,
Yeah, no, makes sense. Who was your favorite FBS opponent? Just out of curiosity.
uh, I mean, Stanford and Colorado State are pretty, I'd say they're, you know, nah, Stanford for sure, just because our head coach went to Stanford the year before we played them, then we went to Stanford and beat them. Um, so it's kind of like a nice little revenge game, I guess. And they're, a Pac-12 opponent, which is always cool if you beat kind of a bigger school like that for sure. So
Mm. How does it feel after those types of games when you win against a bigger echelon opponent?
yeah, I mean it's definitely, you know, good to celebrate with your team, but I also think um you kind of got to keep looking forward for sure.
Mm.
Um, because that was like week 3, so it's like we still got a whole season ahead. Um, and that was a non-conference game, like doesn't matter, and if
Mm.
you're trying to win the Big Sky. Um, so I think it's good to celebrate those kinds of wins against if it's a ranked opponent, if it's a FBS opponent, whatever. Um, but I think it's definitely important to stay focused on the real goal for sure.
Okay. Yeah, no, makes sense. Makes sense. So let's get off a little bit about football for a little bit and let's
Yeah.
talk about you a little more. What are some hobbies or off the field stuff you like doing? Explain to the audience more about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm a pretty, laid back type of guy. I feel like a lot of linemen are like that, kind of not really doing anything crazy. But I live in a house with a bunch of offensive linemen, so we'll just hang out most of the day. We're all pretty nerdy, so we'll watch a movie, we'll um, go to the lakes, stuff like that. Kind of just like low key stuff for the most part. I think I want to kind of get into fishing over the summer. Um, I was really into it in high school, and some of the guys on the team do it, and it sounds fun to get back into. Um, and then I got a Blackstone here, so I chef it up a little bit, which is fun. I cook for the guys a lot of the time, so making dinners and doing stuff like that, and then we have a lot of free time over the summer for sure. We kind of just work out in the morning, and then you kind of have the rest of the day. So I've kind of been on Xbox a little bit. I played a little Battlefront 2. Uh Multiverses is a pretty fun one that's kind of coming back on TikTok and stuff.
Mhm.
Um but I mean, nothing too crazy, just kind of chilling.
Yeah, no, I gotta get back into playing. So yeah, and I heard Multiverses is good. So
Yeah.
yeah, I get that. I get that. What's your favorite cuisine you like cooking?
Um I don't know. I mean, I cook some Philly cheesesteaks that are pretty bomb. Uh I'll do burgers, I'll do fajitas. Um, I mean, definitely protein based or dinners for sure.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, I try to branch out where I can. I do salmon or fish sometimes. Um, but I mean, for the most part, I kind of just like look up, a recipe on TikTok that looks good and kind of follow that, and it usually turns out okay.
There you go. Hey, you can never go wrong with TikTok. I mean, I
Yeah,
looked up a lot of stuff on TikTok, so I get it.
yeah, no doubt.
So yeah, so last question. I mean, we've gotten to pretty elite levels. I mean, you're yourself, you've done massive accomplishments as well as won championships. Um, I don't know if your brother might be watching this. He may be watching this. We'll see.
See.
But he he's going up there, and I'm sure there's other people too that are looking at us and want to be there, or if not, better, or get to like the NFL and all that. So, what would be the one piece of advice you would give to the upcoming generation?
Yeah, I think, with NIL and um kind of media stuff kind of getting more popular within college football, I think it's really important to, not get caught up in it. Um and I mean, I think that's easy to say when you're kind of at a small school and it's not that big of a deal for sure. Um but I mean, hopefully I'll have the opportunity to go to the NFL, and give my shot at that. Hopefully have a good season. But I feel like I can just accredit all that to kind of being a guy that kind of puts his head down and gets to work. And I think that's becoming more rare as you know, as time goes on. I feel like there's less and less of those types of kids. Um, so, be consistent, do your field work, do your technique work, do your workouts. If you're working out 5, 6 times a week, doing field work, making sure your technique's good. If you're doing the extra stuff, um, I think, it all kind of falls into place and it'll work out for you. Um, so I think it's just really important to keep that in mind. Um, even if there's not really any motivation currently, um, you just gotta tell yourself it'll all work out. Because if you put in the work, um, I think you'll be able to get to where you want to go for sure.
Amen. So, yeah, is that something you want to do eventually? Is to get to the NFL?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely, I think, becoming more of a real thing at this point. I've heard some draft grades back. I've heard stuff from scouts. I've had some agents reaching out, kind of, trying to get their foot in the door. So, um, I think it's definitely a possibility. I think I still have to go out there and have a good year, hopefully go to an all-star game, hopefully go to the combine. But I mean, small school guys do it at the FCS level every year, and there's usually a pretty good handful of offensive linemen that are able to make the jump. So, um, I don't think it's crazy, but you know, I definitely am, keeping my eyes forward, taking everything one day at a time. Um, but that's definitely the goal for sure.
Hey, amen. We all got to shoot for the moon. And I mean, you got the accolades to do it so far. And I mean, again, you said it yourself. Just stay in your lane, work. I mean, that's how it's got to be. And I think you had a great message there at the end. And yeah, no, it makes sense. Is there anything else that you want to say, or?
Um, thanks for having me on, man.
Hmm.
Thanks for reaching out. I think it's a cool deal you got going, kind of having athletes on, telling their story, kind of seeing what they're about. I think it's a cool deal for sure. Just thanks for having me.
Hey, it's all good. I mean, I saw your story and I'm like, have done it really, really well at the FCS level. And I think that people don't really recognize that much. And I think is what you said, especially with these times where things are moving everywhere and there's a lot of unknown. I think it's good to hear people's stories and just talk about it. So
Yeah,
yeah, ladies and gentlemen, the Big Sky legend himself and Sacramento State, Jackson Slater.
thanks for having me.
Yes. Stay safe, everyone.